Hi, I'm David Goforth with Cooperative Extension Successful Gardner. We're out here at Christie's Nursery on this beautiful fall day. Fall is one of my favorite times of the year and is also the time when we plant most of our plants. There's a few exceptions, but most of the plants here will do best if planted in the fall of the year. Things like trees, oak trees and stuff that we'll look at today, and also a lot of your shrubs. They'll get a little bit of root growth here in the fall of the year. Then in the spring they'll get a little bit more root growth, and they'll be established by the time we hit the stress of the summer. The summer's the most stressful time on most of our plants here. The exception might be something like a Oriental persimmon, where the winter is the most stressful time, then you can wait till the spring. But for the average plant around here, we'll plant in the fall of the year and let it get established by the time we hit the spring of the year. I want to start with showing you this post oak tree here. Post oaks are an example of a very majestic type of tree. These trees will live for 60, 70, easily 80, 100 years sometimes. And so 100 years now, somebody may be moving a road or moving a shopping mall just to get around a tree that you planted. This post oak can be identified by the leaf here. First thing, when I look at the leaf, I look at the lobes, the fact that there's no bristles on it. No little points here like there'll be on the red oaks that we'll look at later. And the other thing about a post oak is you've got this sort of squared off lobe here on each side. It's almost like a cross shape here with the leaf. And that's very distinctive of the post oak. I'm not sure exactly why it's called post oak. I assume somebody used it for post at some time. Generally the red cedar will last a lot better than the post oak, but evidently it may be one of the longer lasting oak species that we have around here for that particular use. And it doesn't make as good a lumber as, say, the red oak or the white oak, either one. One of the characteristics you can look at this tree is you'll see the twist in the bark, how the bark twists as it goes towards the top of the tree. That is very distinctive for the post oak. Again, you're not likely to be able to buy a post oak in the trade. You're more likely to get one of the red oaks. So let's look at a few of them. This tree right here is called a pin oak. The pin oak, the way you can tell it is the petiole will have a very long petiole. Generally the petiole will be almost 50% the length of the leaf. And you can compare that with the petioles in the scarlet oak and the red oak that we'll see later. They're very short, whereas this petiole, the part right here from the leaf up to the blade, is very long, close to 50% of the length of the blade. The pin oak is in the red oak family, and you can tell that because of the bristles. These points right here on the ends of the lobes, you'll not find that on the white oak or the post oak or in the white oak family. So it's in the red oaks when you see these bristles right here on the end of the leaf. This particular oak right here has got sort of a poor reputation in the coastal plains for various reasons. It tends to yellow out, chlorotic and things, but it does a very good job for us here. One of the things that Christie planted, Rachel Christie and Steve Christie planted about 26 years ago, the oak trees up there at the farmer's market. And you can see how well they've done. Those are pin oaks, and they perform very well for us in that situation there. So a very long-lived tree, a very mature red oak that you can have for your landscape. There's a few other members of the red oak family. Let's take a look at them. This red oak right here is a southern red oak, and the way you tell it is, first of all, you look at the bristles here on the ends of the leaves, and then you look at the base of the leaves. The bristles tell you it's in the red oak family. The base of the leaf here is sort of almost a bell shape, and that will give you the southern red oak. The southern red oak is pretty much equivalent to the pin oak. It's used in the landscape. I like it a little bit better in some ways. It's easier to raise the crown and keep this going up, whereas your pin oak a lot of times will try to put limbs all the way back down to the ground a little bit more than the red oak. But basically an equivalent type tree that you can use, again, a very long-lived tree and a very good addition to our landscape. We want to compare the southern red oak with the northern red oak, which is right beside it here, this example over here. Here we've got another member of the red oak tribe, if you will, almost identical bark. But if you look at the leaf here, you'll notice that it's got a very wide blade, first of all, and typically has a blade that's very wide, sometimes 2 or 3 times wider than this in good growing conditions. And then it also has the top here will flare out as opposed to go down like the southern red oak. So this is your northern red oak here with the wider blade. This last member of the red oak family that I'm going to show you here is the scarlet oak. And I'm not sure exactly where it got its name. It's very prone to turning red during the fall of the year, so it may be from that. Typically, a lot of your oaks were named by people in the sawmill business, but I really, in cutting this up, I can't tell of any thing that would make me think of scarlet on the tree itself. The scarlet oak, again, you've got the bristles of the red oak, but you've got these real deep, wide sinuses right here between the lobes. You've got the lobes, and then this part right in here, this cutout part, goes very down close to the blade like here. And the scarlet oak, there's a few other oaks that'll have similar characteristics, but the scarlet oak particularly has these wide sinuses here. And you separate it from the pin oak because it's got a very short petiole, whereas you remember the pin oak had a very long petiole. But again, it's basically a red oak that we can use, real tolerant of our soils around here, and should do a very good job for you. Another oak that you'll find quite frequently in the nursery industry is a sawtooth oak. And I'm not sure exactly where it fits in. It's got these bristles on the leaves a little bit like a red oak, but it's enough difference here that I think it may just be a separate oak. It's not found in the wild here in North Carolina, to my knowledge. I've not seen it in the wild, so I hadn't had a chance to evaluate it a lot. But a couple of things people like about this tree. Number one, it's very precocious. You can see here the acorns have already been falling off. Here's some acorn cups that are left, and we can look around here in the nursery. Even a tree that's about 12 foot high has got a lot of acorns that have fallen around it. And people will like that for turkeys. They want to plant oak trees for the turkeys to eat the acorns. They want the acorns to show up very quick within 4 or 5 years, as opposed to waiting 10, 15, 20 years. And so they've chosen the sawtooth oak for that. The other thing is landscapers will like to put it in the nursery because in the spring it has sort of a whitish or yellowish color to the foliage when it comes out. And that looks a little bit different than your average tree coming out in the spring of the year. So that's another reason they will select that one. So I'm not real familiar with this one, but it looks like an interesting tree. And again, the sawtooth oak, you can see how I sort of got this sawtooth margin to it right here. That's where it gets its name for this one. This specimen right here is our live oak. And on the live oak, you've got a narrow linear leaf like this, and sort of a lot of times it'll be cupped like this one is, and it'll be a fairly thick, leathery type leaf. This live oak will stay evergreen on into the winter in our climate reliably here in Zone 7. It grows a huge tree farther south. You get down in the Savannah area, you can get a huge majestic tree out of this. You'll also find on the coast from Louisiana all the way around to North Carolina, Virginia area, very common on the coast down there because it'll tolerate salt water. And so this is the same tree here. We can put in our landscapes up here, but because we're cooler, we'll get a smaller tree. This tree, a lot of times, will sort of crown out at the 25, 30 foot mark, as opposed to going on up the majestic specimens like you might see in other parts of the country. But still a nice tree here, and it is a way of getting some evergreen during the winter in what we consider a regular tree, like a live oak tree here. So another very valid option. Again, a long-lived tree. In places like Savannah, it can live 200 or 300 years. Up here, I'm not sure. I don't see them that old, but I'm not sure they've been planted for that long either. So we'll just have to see how it does long-term. But I've seen it last for 25, 30 years with no problem in our landscapes up here. These last two oak trees are actually members of the black oak group, if you will. You can group oaks into like white oaks, red oaks, and then black oaks. And I think they get that name because the bark can be very black. Although in the red oak group, there's also some of those that will have very black bark in them. So it's not an identifying characteristic, but I do think it's the way it's got its name. This particular one right here is called a willow oak. And if you notice the leaf, it looks a lot like a willow leaf. And so that's where it gets its common name. It has real small acorns that drop late in the year. This is a premier shade tree for our lawns, and as a consequence, it's been planted very heavily over the last 40, 50 years, but it's still a very good choice to make even now. The leaves, a lot of times people just ignore these leaves, let them filter down in between the grass blades, maybe mow it a couple of times, and the leaves can be right there under the tree without having to do a lot of raking or whatever. One of the major advantages of a willow oak. May not be quite as long-lived as the white oaks or the post oaks, but they'll still give us 50 years very readily in the landscape as a normal rule. Some of the ones 60 and 70 years of age are starting to get some root rots, particularly they had injuries around the crown, but all in all, a very good shade tree. And it's very kin to this other one. In fact, the trees will cross sometimes, and you'll find some of these that get crossed with this one over here. This one is the water oak, and on a water oak, a very typical leaf would be something like this. And to me, that reminds me of a drop of water. If you can imagine a drop of water or a leaf like this one up here, sort of a drop of water on that leaf. Again, they will cross sometimes, and you'll get some other characteristics in here, but the water oak is going to be a wider blade at some point than the willow oak. The willow oak's pretty much of a linear leaf blade. The water oak's got a broader at the base leaf blade. In the landscape though, these two can be used pretty much interchangeably. Well, these are pretty much the shade trees that you'll find within the nursery industry. Maybe a few others. There are some others growing wild in the county, and a few that have been even planted in ornamental situations in the county. If you have any questions about tree identification, I'll be glad to talk with you about that. And if you have any questions about planting trees, feel free to get in touch with me at the office. And until next time, plant and plant for a better world.